Africa YouTube channel. Today we are kicking off the series, How Was Africa Colonized? Now, this is a question that a lot of you have, and I know a lot of persons have wondered, what was life like in Africa before colonization? And what did Africans do when Europeans tried to colonize them? Were they just, stupid, meek? Did they think colonization was a good thing and gave in easily to it, or did they fight? Well, we're going to find out all the answers to that very shortly, but here's a spoiler, man. Of course, they fought. Did you think our people wanted this? Alright, so today we shall be starting with a very interesting story, and one which is very close to my heart because it tells the story of the slave boy who became a king. And this story of none other than King Jaja of Opobo. Well, unfortunately, it's called Jaja because the name was Juboa, but the British were unable to pronounce the name, so they just called him Jaja, and here is the story. King Jaja of Opobo was born in Omodoroha, Amiibo, in current-day Imo State in the year 1821. He was kidnapped as a boy and taken to Bonny Island in current-day Rivers State. There he was renamed Juboa by his first master, and later resold to King Alali, the head of the Opobo Manila group of houses. It was here that the British, who couldn't pronounce his name properly, gave him the name Jaja. Jaja was an excellent businessman and excelled and became very popular. The abolition of the slave trade in 1807 was supplanted by the trade in palm oil. Palm oil in itself was so vibrant that the region was renamed the Oil Rivers area. As it in business and politics, Jaja became the head of the Anapepo House, extending its activities and influence by absorbing other houses, increasing operations in the hinterland, and augmenting the number of European contacts. While all this happened, Jaja earned his way out of slavery. He was enculturated according to Ijaw rituals and rose to the head of the Anapepo House merchant faction of the Bonny Island. He established a new settlement which he named Opobo in 1865, where he became the king, or as we know him today, King Jaja of Opobo. His new status saw him declare himself independent of Bonny. Opobo soon dominated the region's lucrative palm oil trade and became home to 14 of what were formerly Bonny's 18 trade houses. Part of his success is attributed to the fact that Jaja made moves to block the access of British merchants to the interior, giving him an effective monopoly. At times, Opobo even shipped palm oil directly to Liverpool, independent of British middlemen. Apart from the fact that he was a wealthy merchant and a very diplomatic man, he was also a man of honor and power. This is exemplified when he aided the Queen of England in a battle in the Gold Coast, the Ashanti War, and was awarded a Sword of Honor from Queen Victoria in 1871. As the oil market grew, the Europeans made efforts to steal the market and control it, but King Jaja blocked all such efforts using any means necessary. At the 1884 Berlin Conference, however, the other European powers designated Opobo as British territory, and the British soon moved to claim it. When Jaja refused to cease taxing British traders, Henry Hamilton Johnston, a British vice consul, invited Jaja to negotiations in September 1887. Jaja went on board a warship and never returned. The British kidnapped him, tried him in Accra in the Gold Coast, now Ghana. He was finally deported to the West Indies and later to the island of São Vicente, Cape Verde, off the coast of West Africa. Once more, King Jaja eventually won his freedom. In 1891, Jaja was granted permission to return to Opobo but died en route, allegedly poisoned with a cup of tea in June. His body was shipped instead to Tenerife in the Canary Islands, where he was buried. Following his exile and death, the power of the Opobo state rapidly declined and the land was plagued with slave raids, riots, and the British exploited the land for its natural resources. After many years of clamor and protest, his body was promptly exhumed and sent back to his beloved Opobo kingdom, where he was laid to rest. His remains are now a sacred grave shrine behind the palace of the Amayanabo of Opobo. And that brings the story of Jaja of Opobo to an end. So there are a few similarities you're going to find between the story of Jaja and some of the African kings that we're going to look at, because King Jaja was not the first king to get on a boat and did not return the same. There was King Kosoko, the Oba of Lagos, whom we shall talk about sometime in the future. And Jaja would not be the only king who would proceed on exile and would not make it home alive, despite having been granted freedom and released to go home. There were other kings who also found themselves poisoned or died by some strange misfortune just before they made it home. And top of the list would be Chua II, the Kabalego of Bunyoro of Uganda. And interestingly, we shall be looking at his story next week, because just like Jaja, he would become a king very early in life, and he would engage the British in one of the hardest fought wars in the colonization story. So keep a date with us next week Friday, when we shall explore the story and exploits of Chua II. And there were some very interesting things that man did that no other king, not only in Africa but in the world, accomplished. So what did you think about the story of King Jaja of Opobo? Are you Nigerian? Are you conversant with the struggles of the Niger Delta against the Nigerian government, against British influences for resource control, and all that's happened in the region, starting from over 100 years ago? Because sometimes when people are born in this generation, they imagine that the struggles that they face started today, but no, it's always been that way. The fight's always been on, and it doesn't look like it's ever ending. Our ancestors fought till they died. What will people in this generation do? Give in real quick and accept whatever is given. Well, that's up to you. Let's talk in the comments section. What can we take out of the story, and how does it help our struggles today? Well, if you thought the story was interesting, then do well to give us a like. Comment section is where we interact and talk about the stuff we liked or did not like about the story, where we talk about missing facts, ask questions, and all that. So if you want to engage with me and with other members of this beautiful community that we have here on the Service Africa YouTube channel, do well to bring it on. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, well, just come back next week and watch the next video. I think that's more important than having you as a subscriber. But if you're feeling extra generous, that's fine. But if you don't feel like subscribing, that's also okay. Oh, of course, I'm kidding. Guys, come on, click on the subscribe button right now. I could use 1 million subscribers. And I mean it. All right, see you on next week Friday. Bye-bye.
On July 29, 1975, Nigeria's head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, was overthrown in Kampala, Uganda. The overthrow would be an unprecedented, bloodless one, the first time in Nigeria's history. Yakubu Gowon was 31 years and 9 months old when he succeeded Major General Johnson Thomas Umunakwe Aguiyi-Ironsi as head of state. He went on to rule the country for 9 years, the longest rule ever of Nigeria's military heads of state. General Yakubu Sinwa Gowon was born on October 19, 1934 in present-day Plateau State, northern Nigeria, and grew up in humble and sometimes difficult circumstances. Gowon attended the then government college, now Bariwa College in Zaria. As a result, he shared the same alma mater with some of the northern elites and senior northern army officers of his day. Yakubu Gowon decided to enter the army after he had been encouraged by his British principal and vice principal to join the military. Although he had wanted to be a teacher, engineer, and medical doctor, Gowon chose the army. Gowon enlisted into the Nigerian army and trained in the Officer Cadet Training School, Eshie, Ghana, in 1954. He was the first indigenous adjutant 4th Battalion, Queen's Own Nigerian Regiment, as the Nigerian Army was then known, between 1960 and 1961, and was Brigade Major of United Nations Peacekeeping Forces, Lualaba, Congo, between January and June 1963. Gowon was promoted Major in 1962, Lieutenant Colonel in 1963, named Adjutant General Nigerian Army from 1963 to 1965, was Chief of Staff in January 1966, became the second military ruler on August 1, 1966, promoted Major General in 1967, and became a 4-star General in 1971. During the weekend of July 29, 1966, following a violent rolling mutiny that led to the overthrow and murder of Agui Ironsi, Gowon became the new Supreme Commander of the Nigerian Armed Forces, as he was the most senior army officer from northern Nigeria. Soon after he was anointed as the new Supreme Commander, the separation from the army began. Like Ironsi, the title Supreme Commander conferred certain absolute powers on him. Nevertheless, complex political negotiations with regional representatives, who in turn were reporting to the various regional military governors, set the tone for federal-state relations and the subsequent emergence of powerful state governors. These governors used the distractions of the federal government first with the restoration of law and order in the barracks, and later with the prosecution of the war to consolidate their powers. It was not that obvious during the conflict, but became apparent afterward, particularly from the standpoint of their military colleagues in the barracks.
Fancy something delish? No worries, we got it.
Did somebody say just eat?
At the federal level, Gowon, who had little prior experience in non-military public administration, was kept within the outstretched arms of the sophisticated civil servants. In October 1970, Gowon announced a 6-year 9-point plan, which he said must be accomplished before the government of the country could be handed over to the politicians. According to Gowon, the target year to accomplish this 9-point plan and return the country to a normal constitutional government was 1976. Although the 1973 census was one of the few items among his 9-point plan that he pursued with vigor, the census actually turned out to be a blunder and perhaps the most serious political misadventure of the Gowon era. Results released in May 1974 against the advice of the Census Commission indicated that Nigeria's population, supposedly 79.76 million people, had increased by 43.3% since 1963, far more than any other developing country. With 64% of the reported population, the North had registered an increase of 72.4% since the 1963 result that was controversial even then. The Midwest had increased in population by 27.6% and the East by 11%, while the West decreased by 6%. Lagos increased by 71.5%. In spite of the ban on political activity, prominent Nigerians went public with angry protests about the results. Gowon did try unconvincingly to reassure the nation that post-enumeration check, but not a recount, would be conducted, and that the final results would be released in October 1975. However, it never happened. In January 1971, Gowon, reeling under accusations that his wartime actions were responsible for inflation, implemented the recommendations of the Chief Simeon Adebo Wages and Salaries Commission and increased the salaries of workers. Surprisingly, labor unrest resulted, some say aggravated by the not-so-tactful announcement by Information Commissioner Chief Anthony Enahoro that those private companies that had increased their salaries at least once since 1964 would be exempted. Following the second and final report of the Commission, however, a subsequent controversial pay raise with arrears was again approved by the Supreme Military Council in October 1971. In early 1975, oil production fell steeply because of a sudden decline in world demand, resulting in lower prices and shortfalls in revenue expectations. Although prices recovered somewhat later in the year after an intervention by OPEC, the temporary economic gloom and alleged mismanagement that caused it, combined with the widespread industrial action in May and June, which brought the country to a standstill, helped in rationalizing the overthrow of the Gowon government in July of that year.
6 minutes.
Although Gowon was not personally corrupt, some persons in his regime allegedly engaged in corrupt practices. For example, by the time of the coup, the average commercial property holding of his governors was estimated at about 8 houses each in the range of 49,000 naira to 120,000 naira, along with farming estates. This was a big deal at the time. Nevertheless, like many regimes that came after, Gowon did make an initial and ongoing effort to be seen combating corruption, such as with the Investigation of Assets Decree No. 37 of 1968, and subsequent efforts to investigate and punish deep-seated post-war corruption in the military. For example, using the technique of over-invoicing, construction materials were often bought outside the country by public servants and contractors at exorbitant prices. Even the practice of importing expired drugs was already well established. Two important things to note about the July 29, 1975 coup is that 1. It was bloodless, and 2. It was carried out by Gowon's kinsman, his right-hand man, then Colonel Joseph Navin Garba. He was the commander of the Brigade of Guards. Garba was also the man who announced the coup on Radio Nigeria. The officer who made the announcement was no ordinary colonel. He was the commander of the elite Brigade of Guards in the federal capital. He was also widely regarded as a confidant of General Gowon and trusted loyalist of the regime. His co-option and active participation or neutralization were crucial to the bloodless nature and success of the overthrow.
I'm Jamie from Nested, and I am the area manager for Islington. So I became an estate agent in 2007 in Islington. Over that time, I have had the privilege of selling houses, everything from ex-local authority through to your Georgian terraces on Richmond Avenue, or indeed Hemmingford Road, where we are sat today. What I love about estate agency is actually the people and the relationships that we forge along their journeys. For most, moving homes is one of those big life decisions, and it's an absolute honour to be involved in it and ensure that it happens smoothly. The great thing about selling with Nested is we've got your back on both sides of the transaction. Not only will we achieve a fantastic sale for you, but moreover, we will act as a buying agent to ensure that you are getting the best possible price and that it fits with your timeline on your purchase. I often get asked why Nested in Islington. You have access to an absolutely fantastic team, which is backed up by an online platform which gives you access to tools and data to guide you through your sale. Book your free valuation with me at nested.com/Islington.
Now, let us look at some of the factors that worked against Gowon, which brought about the overthrow. During the Nigerian Civil War, Yakubu Gowon had no prior field command experience above the subunit level. He was very well trained, no doubt, perhaps one of the best trained, and had plenty of staff experience, but he had never actually commanded a battalion except over the weekend of January 15, 1966, let alone a brigade, and certainly not a division. The divisional commanders were mostly independent, doing what they liked. When they misbehaved, Gowon preferred a non-confrontational approach. Then Major General Gowon hardly visited the war front. When he did, It was in early 1969, after the war had already been in progress for almost 2 years. He also had a penchant for communicating directly with field commanders using a radio set at the Dam Barracks, bypassing the army headquarters. There was plenty of waste and massive corruption, not only in the Ministry of Defense, but also among arms purchasing teams and dealers sent abroad to acquire weapons and ammunition. Political undercurrents were never far from the surface either. As noted earlier, Gowon promised to hand over in 1976, but in an Independence Day broadcast on October 1, 1974, he reneged on that promise. In 1969, Gowon got married to former Miss Victoria Zakari in a state and society wedding in Lagos, which, considering the wartime situation and ongoing suffering, appeared lavishly distasteful and imperious to many observers, including war front commanders. The presence of a resident woman in his life naturally resulted in a decrease in Gowon's interactions with his former army bachelor, Joseph Garba. Gowon also compounded his situation by gradually becoming distant from his constituency, that is, the army. After September 1974, his increasingly frustrated Guards Brigade commander, for example, had to book an appointment just to see him. Many other officers who could drop in the past or came to expect occasional working dinners found access to him increasingly restricted. Unfortunately, some army officers were privately getting tired of Gowon. Some began to be alarmed that they might be destroyed if they remained aligned with him in the face of opposition from the army and increasing public tension. Among those who felt this way were two of Gowon's closest proteges, Colonels Joseph Navin Garba of the Guards Brigade and Anthony Ochefu, the Provost Marshal. After a private meeting in Garba's office, they both resolved that Gowon must be overthrown as Nigeria's head of state, preferably without any bloodshed. Don't hesitate to like and share it with your friends. You can subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to receive the latest videos as they drop. Also, don't miss the